Dr. Santokh Singh is correct, and I still do think Klemoski and TMJ should speak to him, should speak to this Malaysian football legend, to hear what he really has in his heart, even if some practices and some suggestions are not relevant to what is required in today's modern football, but that heart required, that heart is what I think this Malaysian team really needs. That heart, that desire, that passion, even with today's money, is still quite required. So Dr. Santokh Singh recently caused some controversy when he branded in a series of quotes to Astro Arena on Football Association of Malaysia as the Football Association of Mat Sallehs, which provoked a strong response from both the Malaysian national team head coach Peter Klemoski and the region of Johor Tunku Ismail Idris, who oversees the Harimau Malaya project as an independent entity from the FAM. And how did it all come to this? Tanya J attempts to find out the roots behind the furor over the quote that led to that rather infamous clipping the Football Association of Mat Sallehs. But before we go into the topic of why Datuk Santokh Singh said the way he did, we have to understand the context and also the person himself, the main person behind the center of this controversy. Dr. Santokh Singh is no stranger to Malaysian football. In fact, he's one of the current living legends of Malaysian football, having been a pivotal part of the Harimau Malaya team in the golden generation of the 1970s and 1980s. In fact, his glittering record speaks a lot for himself and is one that many of the current generations and the more recent generations struggle to reach. As a player, Santokh Singh has actually helped Malaysia qualify for the 1980 Olympic Games when it was still open to the full national teams as long as they are not professionals. And he has also appeared in the 1976 AFC Asian Cup Finals and helped Malaysia win 2 back-to-back gold medals in the Southeast Asian Games in 1977 and 1979 when the Games football tournament was still open to the full national team before the advent of the ASEAN Championship in 1996, and also was a member of the team of the Harimau Malaya squad that won the Asian Games bronze medal in 1976. So, in that era where Santokh was active as a stalwart defender for Harimau Malaya, he had achieved those heights when the coaches of those squads in the 1970s and even the early 1980s, they were largely coached by local coaches, and interestingly enough, also included Mat Salleh as what he uttered in those quotes last week. In 1979, when Malaysia won the gold medal in the Southeast Asian Games in that year, they were coached by the late German technician Karl-Heinz Wegener, who is no stranger to Southeast Asian football from the 1970s to the 1990s as an effective coach who brought the best out of the players he has under his disposal. Even in the 1990s, when he was the first coach to bring Vietnam back into the international football fold and brought them to the 1995 SEA Games final. And until his death, he was, at the turn of the century, he was also involved in coaching Perak in the Malaysian Super League. So there was Mat Salleh who was involved. But I think in this context, what Datuk Santokh Singh was really disturbed by was the fact that the current Malaysian national team coaching setup and management were largely filled up by foreigners, from the CEO of the Harimau Malaya structure led by Canadian Rob Friend to the head coach Klemoski and all the various other assistant coaches, fitness trainers, physiotherapists. They are all filled up by non-Malaysians, and I think and what I strongly believe is, as one of the few guys who have attained such high levels that few Malaysians have managed to achieve in subsequent generations, let alone even half of what they achieved, apart from the generation of Aidil Zafwan, Badro Bakhtiar, Safi Salih, who managed to win both the 2009 SEA Games gold medal and form the core of the 2010 ASEAN Championship winning squad under Datuk K. Rajagopal, which I will elaborate a little bit more on that later. But apart from this group of players, and including those who went for the Asian Cup finals, the first direct qualification since the 1980 squad, it was already an immense achievement, but I think it's still a little bit far off, and that is despite Harimau Malaya having a lot more naturalized players in the team. So, in this context, in this whole scheme of things, let us be clear of one thing. Santokh Singh always has the best interests of Malaysian football in his heart. He has the best intentions. He wants to see the best for Malaysian football, especially when I think over those decades after he retired from playing, where he does feel quite disheartened on why Malaysian football has lagged so far behind when other countries in Southeast Asia and the wider East Asian subcontinent has caught up and way well overtaken the rest of, overtake the rest of Asia, the rest Malaysia and the rest into world-class status such as Japan and South Korea in particular. I think in Datuk Santokh Singh's mind, he really cannot comprehend why Malaysian football has lagged so far behind that it has remained in a rather minor status from its heyday as one of the more feared teams in Asia. Although in this context, football is still widely amateur, the Arabs have not come strongly into play yet when Kuwait was the strongest national team in West Asia. Then you also have, then at the time, much of the football around the wider Asian continent was still amateur, and the Central Asian teams such as your national teams, the 5 former Soviet republics, then they were still part of the wider Russia or Soviet Union then. So in this context, Malaysia was one of the more advanced football nations in Asia in the 70s and even in the mid 1980s. But ever since winning the 1989 SEA Games gold medal, also again ironically under another Mat Salleh, Englishman Trevor Hartley, Malaysia has not really reached those heights. And I think what we saw last year when Malaysia reached the Asian Cup finals is probably a start of a revival. And that's where I think while it encouraged a lot of Malaysians, the concerns over all the various naturalized players has played a part in Santokh Singh uttering this infamous quote apart from among all these. So, back to Santokh Singh himself, the man behind the center of this controversy. In my interactions with him previously as a journalist, and from what I've seen in the quotes, I'm not surprised by what Santokh has said. For he's not one to mince his words. He can be very diplomatic, but his heart is always in Malaysian football. And even though maybe some of the suggestions that he still says these days, even in the recent podcast that I watched last week with Harish Dio and Rizal Hashim, it's quite clear that he wants to see a generation of Malaysians where they can at least match where he had seen in the 1970s and 80s, even with the increased competition from more Southeast Asian, more Asian member confederations in the Asian Football Confederation, more intense competition from within the Asian continent, where the middle tier is really quite packed. He does decide to see Malaysia reach these heights again because he knows that Malaysians still love their football, Malaysians still care for their national team. He knows that he himself, like many other Malaysians, past and present footballers, the recently retired ones, they all want to see Malaysian football reach the heights that he has seen, and what many others after him had hoped to but had fallen short as well. So, but the other thing is, some of the things he suggests are unfortunately probably a little dated, but you cannot doubt that Santokh Singh always has the best intentions and heart for Malaysian football. So, going down to the topic of Mat Salleh's, he's actually not wrong when he talks about the Football Association Mat Salleh's, because look at the current technical setup right now. The majority of them are dominated by non-Malaysians, professionals who come from outside of Asia. Even though Klemoski has mentioned in defense of his coaching squad that there are 3 current Malaysians in the national coaching setup, it is also quite evident that many of them do not come from Asia. In fact, ever since the professionalization of football in Malaysia, it is clearly evident that it was actually another Asian, South Korean head coach Kim Pang-gon, who brought Malaysia into the Asian Cup finals on merit since 1980. Yes, another Asian. There were other Europeans who had tried to within their best practices, their best intentions to bring the Harimau Malaya forward during the 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, but yet they have fallen short by various measures, from the rather unfortunate Claude Leroy, who eventually after leaving Malaysia still managed to coach African national teams in the World Cup finals, to Bertala Miske, who managed to bring Malaysia into the 2004 ASEAN Championship semi-finals but was sacked after strangling the throat of a Singaporean player in a friendly in 2005, to Alan Harris, who also brought Malaysia into the 2002 ASEAN Championship semi-finals but fell a bit short, but achieved heroic status after thrashing Singapore 4-0 in the opening group stage game at the Old National Stadium in Singapore. And even Nello Vinganda, who was widely vilified for not being able to bring out the best of the talent that Malaysia had on offer in the mid-2010s. So when it comes to the non-Asians who have taken charge of Malaysian national team in this period from the 90s to the 2010s, it's quite clear that they are really a mixed bag. It's also quite evident to Santokh that none of them have achieved the levels that Karl-Heinz Wegang did when Wegang was coaching the Malaysian national team in the late 1970s. And in this context again, Wegang was the only foreigner coaching the national team in the 1970s coaching setup, where the rest of his assistants are all Malaysians. So, but times have changed. There has been now the introduction of not just mere assistant coaches, but also video analysts, fitness trainer, goalkeeper coaches, and medical doctors, and you name it, whatever there is, head of performance, head of sports science, whatever you name it. These are all very increasingly specialized fields in the world of football, especially modern football, where you need real specialists to be able to coach and bring the best out of the players they have at their disposal. And unfortunately, in this current environment, there are very few Malaysians who are really qualified to fill up all these various positions, whether it's your fitness coaches, where they have always all been foreign, because perhaps they feel that foreign coaches can stretch perhaps what Malaysians can really do perhaps in the past, out of the 90 minutes where they were really effective for the first 75 minutes, to ensure that they can run beyond 120 minutes. To even your sports scientists and physiotherapists who are supposed to understand all these tissues, all these minute intricacies within our human body, in what the athletes can perform to the maximum and what will affect their ability to perform to the best, or even perform at a level even when they are not fully fit or they have fatigue. It's like greater in-depth analysis has been invested in the world of football on all these issues, but it's quite clear also in this context that the Malaysians, not all, very few are equipped to fill all these roles. And even if they are, many of them are probably already absorbed into the Malaysian National Sports Body, KBS. So their high elite, high performance units, so they are all largely there. So it's not easy to just, even if you plug them away from KBS into FAM, will they be able to perform the same thing when the demands of football are actually a lot higher than that of perhaps swimming, track and field, cycling, badminton, those other sports that Malaysians have a strong interest in? It is not as straightforward as it seems. But still, even with the increased presence of those foreigners in the national team setup over those decades, it's rather ironic that it's actually the Malaysians who have done a lot better as national head coaches than those Mat Sallehs that Santokh Singh was talking about. Even with all due credit to Alan Harris and even the unfortunate Claude Leroy, it's really the locals who outperform the foreigners in this regard before Kim Pangong came along, results wise. I mean, I already mentioned Dr. K. Rajagopal earlier. Yes, he was the man who was instrumental in bringing back interest, reviving the interest in Malaysian football after the lows in the 1990s to even to the nadir in 2007 when Norizam Bakar was responsible for the non-functioning of the Malaysian national team when they were among the four co-hosts in the Asian Cup finals, recording the worst ever performance with successive defeats without, to an extent, much of a fight, apart from the last game against Iran when they put up a real intense rear guard action with a much changed squad. But Dr. K. Rajagopal, between 2009 to I think in 2012, he was responsible for reviving that wave of passion and interest in Malaysian football when he first guided that core group among the players I mentioned, Safi Salih, Aidil Zafwan, Badro Bakhtiar, who were Southeast Asian Games champions in 2009, and with that core, that squad, they lifted the trophy after defeating Vietnam in the final in 2010. And no other Malaysian coach has reached such highs since, even though Dr. Ong Kim Swee has also guided the Malaysian under-23s to reach the final, to another gold medal in 2011, and reach the final of the 2017 Southeast Asian Games on home soil in 2017. And then you have, who else? Datuk Dollah Saleh, who is now one of the vice presidents of the FAM. He also brought Harimau Malaya to the final of the 2014 ASEAN Championship, where they narrowly lost to Thailand on aggregate. So it's quite clear that with the right support, with the right backing, the locals can still do it as head coaches. But to bring it up to another level, such as in Klebowski's current mission, to qualify for the Asian Cup finals regularly, back to back, and not have that 2004 finals as a 2024 finals, as a one-off. That's where you need that consistency. That's where you need the heightened expertise, and this is where Tunku Ismail Ibrahim, the region of Johor, had a lot to say that Instagram post where he's not wrong. He's correct in saying that you need top level expertise to bring out the best in the locals, to inspire the national team to perform to a high level, and that includes with the naturalized players, because the naturalized players, as what we have seen in the Indonesian national team, has for the immediate short term push up to a high level where they are more than competitive against the best of Asian teams have to offer. Even when you take away the runaway world-class teams, national teams in Japan, South Korea, and Iran, and Australia in this instance. So make what we will also in this case. So, but now I'm going to this part where I think this is where Dr. Santokh Singh may not have been this aware, and this is why there was Klebowski, TMJ, they were able to bring out quite robust responses to it, because they are the ones currently at the forefront of this Harimau Malaya project, that where they want to bring Malaysia back to a certain level where the likes of Santokh Singh, Sochin Ao, Mokhtar Dahari, they all used to attain back in the 70s and 80s. Yes, that golden generation of Malaysian football, which is which with all respect to the K. Rajagopal boys of the late 2000s and 2010s, but still I think they fell quite short because they failed to reach the Asian Cup finals. So in all respect, in the wider picture of things, in the current settings, Malaysian football has to look at a few things with clear-eyed views, no rose-tinted lenses to brush over the flaws and the inadequacies. I mean, we look at the best local-born Malaysian player, Arif Aiman. He's clearly one of the best in Southeast Asia at this moment, one of the best. But is he at the level of Thai football legend Chanathip Songkransen at his peak? Or is he, never mind being miles away from recent Europa League champion Song Hyun-min of South Korea? I think there's still a significant gap that Arif Aiman, the best Malaysian player on offer in recent years, has to the best, where he's already better than even perhaps your Safi Sali and all that, aided by the strong training environment in Johor Darul Takzim. There's still some way for Arif Aiman to go before he can even reach the heights of Chanathip and Tirton Bumantam. Never mind your Song Hyun-mins and all your other Japanese players like Takefusa Kubo and the like, who are all excelling in Europe at this moment. And going back to the technical stuff, are there enough local coaches who are more than adequately ready to fill in on these shoes when they eventually leave their respective jobs? Are there really? Apart from those that I mentioned that they are in KBS, are there enough qualified coaches who can be as good a fitness trainer as the current incumbent at the helm? Are there enough assistant coaches and video analysts who are currently as good as those who are currently at the helm? Really as good, not just being trained. It's easy to get numbers who are qualified because they pass the courses and all that, but are they as good in their practices, in their real life jobs, once they have passed the course to achieve a certain level where they can seriously be considered for a national team? This is where we are not sure. And also, more significantly, with TMJ now in full control behind the scenes in this Harimau Malaya project, will these Mat Sallehs as what Santokh Singh has quoted, dare to fool around in their jobs, with him keeping a close eye on the Harimau Malaya project, apart from his close attention from in Johor Darul Takzim, and also as the region of Johor, the overall governance of the Johor state. Will these Mat Sallehs be able to escape from such scrutiny, given his ruthlessness when he has shown at times in charge of JDT? Will these Mat Sallehs be able to get away with it? So I think in all contexts, wrapping up this, Datuk Santokh Singh clearly has the best intentions of Malaysian football at his heart. He means what he says, he does not mince his words. He's also correct in his descriptions because, unfortunately, in the wider scheme of things, the previous Mat Sallehs have let Malaysian football down, and the local head coaches have done a lot better results-wise, tournament-wise. But it was also a Korean Kim Bang-gong who actually led Malaysia national team back into the Asian Cup finals on merit since 1980. And currently, when you look at the current grand scheme of things, where they say Malaysian football is messy, it is, but it's less messy than it was in the past. Still, to revolutionize Malaysian football, to try to reach even to the likes of your Saudis, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and at that level, the upper middle tier, I think that takes still quite a lot of work. And having seen how Indonesia have rapidly escalated the stakes when it comes to Southeast Asian football rivalry with their most successful World Cup qualifying campaign ever, regardless whether they reach the World Cup finals in North America next year or otherwise, Malaysia do feel compelled that they need to act on it, which is a good thing because competitions begets competitions, and it brings out the best in those national teams who do still aspire to reach a respectable level in Asian football, in the wider Asian football rankings, and not just being merely as the headquarters of the Asian Football Confederation. So I think in this regard, Datuk Santokh Singh is correct, and I still do think Klemoski and TMJ should speak to him, should speak to this Malaysian football legend, to hear what he really has in his heart, even if some practices and some suggestions are not relevant to what is required in today's modern football. But that heart required, that heart, is what I think this Malaysian team really needs. That heart, that desire, that passion, even with today's money, is still quite required. So I still believe TMJ and the current national team head coach Peter Klemowski will do well, and Rob Friend and all the others, to listen to this veteran Malaysian football legend, an old man, but one who always has the best interest of Malaysian football in heart, to hear what he has to say, to listen to what they feel, and possibly maybe be inspired by what he has done for Malaysian football in their heyday, and see what they can think to revive it after that. Because we are not talking about some former Malaysian footballer. It's a Malaysian football legend who has attained such heights, and I think it would be wrong for anyone in the current national team setup, in the Harimau Malaya setup, to just dismiss him out of hand. So, in short, the heart is needed to complement what is currently in place in the Harimau Malaya, because when these two work together very well, it could be a lot more formidable than Malaysia realizes.